I mean, a Stephen Miller world where strong powers just are able to invade weaker powers is a world in which weaker powers are going to want to get nuclear weapons or ally with China, or we live in a world where Europe now thinks that because they have to be scared of the United States, maybe they should ally more strongly with China. It's not that, it's to say that we are sovereign in South America is just factually wrong. We are not sovereign in South America.
But Stephen Miller's describing a real world. He's describing a real...
No, he's not. He's describing...
Russia already invaded Ukraine.
Is it good or bad?
Of course not, but that's the reality.
In today's video, Abby Phillip and Neera Tanden takes on Lyndia Moynihan on NewsNight, with Abby Phillip as a heated CNN debate erupts over Trump's foreign policy, from Venezuela to the push to acquire Greenland. As Lyndia Moynihan defends a power-driven approach, Abby Phillip and Neera Tanden challenge the risks to US alliances, international norms, and global stability. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip and Neera Tanden shuts down Lyndia Moynihan on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
That the Maduro operation was sort of a proving ground for Trump and his aides. And, you know, Joe, I guess a lot of people are asking today, why not just increase U.S. military presence in Greenland, which we could easily do vis-a-vis a treaty that already exists? Why the threats?
Well, I think part of that is that NATO and specifically Denmark haven't done that. They haven't done that. I think one of the interesting things about this...
I'm talking about U.S. military presence.
My point is, I think the interesting thing is that while Democrats are up in arms about what Trump said vis-a-vis, you know, throwing the idea of military intervention out there, none of the Democrats are actually challenging the premise that Greenland is a strategic asset that should be perhaps in the United States' control, or that it would be a great benefit to the national security, right? Greenland's a vital part of the GIUK.
A lot of people are questioning that premise, though.
Yeah,
really? So you're saying that if Trump acquires Greenland, are you saying that if Trump acquires Greenland, the Democrats will give it back?
So Ruben Gallego, he is introducing a resolution to block Trump from invading Greenland. He says, wake up, Trump is telling us exactly what he wants to do. We must stop him before he invades another country.
But he's not saying we shouldn't take over Greenland. Look,
well,
two-thirds of Greenlanders...
He is literally saying we shouldn't take over Greenland.
Two-thirds of Greenlanders just released a poll, right? Greenland government released a poll. Two-thirds do not want to be a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, right?
So do they want to be a part of the United States?
No, I'm not saying that. The Independence Party in Greenland is the largest party. The largest bloc of voters are people who want to be independent. Why can't the Trump administration negotiate and acquire rights to Greenland?
There's a long way between, you know, we want to have a closer relationship with Greenland. We want to stop China and Russia from having influence. And we're just going to take it because it belongs to us. That's a big leap.
And I think, you know, listen, Greenland is very different from Venezuela. It's got very strong allies. Venezuela has allies and dictators like Ortega and Cuba, who are even more bankrupt than Venezuela is, and who depended on them for oil. But Greenland does have allies and is part of a NATO treaty that would come to its defense. Frankly, I wish that, and if he really is going to purchase it, of course, it needs to be approved and appropriated by Congress, unless he's going to get Elon Musk and his pack of billionaires to pay for it, like they do for the ballroom. Let's see how much more they're willing to put up. But before he sets his sights on Greenland, it's not like the Venezuela thing is mission accomplished. If you remember, you know, the famous George W. Bush term. Right now, as we sit here, there are political prisoners in Venezuela. There are U.S. hostages being held by the Maduro regime, which is intact in Venezuela. So I don't know how you can say, oh, what happened in Venezuela is just absolutely great. So now let's move on to what other region we can appropriate. I mean, it makes no sense to me. Yeah.
The tension in this debate really comes down to whether power alone equals good policy, and that's where Abby Phillip and Ana Navarro's side holds up better under scrutiny. History shows that threatening allies instead of working through them almost always backfires. The US already has a defense agreement with Denmark and a permanent military presence in Greenland through Thule Air Base, which has been critical to missile defense for decades. Expanding that presence legally and cooperatively is not only possible, it's exactly how NATO is designed to function. What often gets lost is that Greenland is not some empty chessboard. International law is clear that self-determination matters, and polling consistently shows Greenlanders prioritize independence, not being absorbed by another power. Ignoring that reality undermines the very democratic values the US claims to defend, and gives authoritarian states an excuse to justify their own land grabs elsewhere. There's also the credibility issue. When US leaders casually float military threats against allies, it weakens Washington's ability to push back against Russia in Ukraine or China in Taiwan. You can't argue that borders matter only when it's convenient. That inconsistency is exactly what rivals exploit in global forums and diplomatic negotiations. And while Greenland is framed as a clean strategic win, the Venezuela situation proves how messy this approach actually is. The Maduro regime remains in power, political prisoners are still detained, and US hostages remain an unresolved problem. Declaring success and immediately moving on to the next geopolitical target doesn't solve instability, it compounds it. Ultimately, strength isn't just about dominance, it's about restraint, alliances, and legitimacy. Abby Phillip and Ana Navarro are pointing toward a foreign policy that actually protects US interests without burning down the system that made America influential in the first place.
The situation is certainly very much unresolved, but it does feel like we're having a very theoretical conversation as well with respect to Greenland. The president isn't so much saying over and over again, we're going to invade. There's been some conversation, and this question keeps getting raised. Would you rule out military operations in the region? They won't rule out anything. Okay, fine. But how serious an issue is this? I think the point you made, Abby, is precisely the right one. We have a military base in Greenland. If we wanted to put more things there, we could. The real question here is, for such a transactional presidential administration, why aren't they making better efforts to cultivate stronger relationships with Greenland, with Denmark, so that we can have a greater influence in the region? There is a totally reasonable aspiration to project more power into that region. The Russians and the Chinese want to be able to control the Arctic. We would prefer that it was us who's doing that. And I suspect that that's a lot of the reason for the Venezuelan operation as well.
Well, he woke up one day and he wants to be James Monroe.
Well, and not just that,
Rowe.
but I mean, maybe he and Stephen Miller as well. Stephen Miller seems to be hankering for a world in which it's just about who's strongest. And here's what he told Jake Tapper about that in an interview yesterday.
We live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else, but we live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world that have existed since the beginning of time.
So, governed by strength. I mean, here's what the Wall Street Journal editorial board says about that. Western military power is indispensable, but the corollary is that a successful U.S. president doesn't reduce America's role in the world to might makes right. Mm-hmm. Why are they saying this? Well, because might makes right. It doesn't just embolden you, it then emboldens the bad guys. It emboldens the Irans, the Putins, and others who want to use their force to throw their weight around the world.
Well, I think with Greenland, their prime minister said they're open for business. I don't see a world in which we militarily intervene in there. But I think what Stephen Miller is noting, and I think is important to be aware of, is we are approaching the world like the status quo is just going to maintain itself. And the reality is there are foreign adversaries like Russia who invaded Ukraine, like China, that are going to be aggressive. And so I think it's very reasonable to be concerned about the fact that if we aren't aggressive in asserting our own sovereignty in this hemisphere, there will be other countries that do. And China already has a presence there. So to your question about why would we need to cobble together some sort of deal, Marco Rubio has said maybe we purchase it. Truman wanted to purchase it. William Seward wanted to purchase it. They aren't the first people to want to purchase.
Put a deal on the table.
Greenland. If they agree to this, I think it could work because we don't want China to have a presence there, have access to these rare earth minerals that we need.
Yeah, I mean, Trump could put a deal on the table. He has not. But I also think that when you're talking about the way that the world works won't self-perpetuate, that's true. But it's also bizarre to be in the White House and then try to be destroying the very world that we created. I mean,
what really stands out in this exchange is how much stronger the argument is when it's grounded in how power actually works in the modern world. The US already projects influence in the Arctic through existing treaties, NATO commitments, and a long-standing military footprint in Greenland. International security experts have pointed out that expanding cooperation with Denmark and Greenland would be faster, cheaper, and more effective than rattling sabers. The idea that might makes right sounds tough, but history shows it usually empowers the wrong actors. When major powers signal that force overrides rules, countries like Russia and China don't feel deterred, they feel validated. That's exactly what happened after Crimea in 2014, when weak international coordination encouraged further aggression. There's also an economic reality being ignored. Greenland's rare earth minerals and Arctic shipping lanes matter, but access to them depends on stability and trust. China has gained influence globally not just through military power, but by offering infrastructure deals, trade, and long-term investment. The US undermines itself when it treats allies as obstacles instead of partners. Strategically, burning political capital over Greenland while unresolved crises like Venezuela persist makes the policy look scattershot. The Maduro regime remains in place, political prisoners are still detained, and instability continues. Kameli Foster and Abby Phillip are pointing to a smarter version of leadership, one that recognizes real threats but understands that alliances, legitimacy, and diplomacy multiply strength. Undermining the post-war system the US built doesn't make America safer. It hands rivals chaos.
that's what Putin wants to do. That's what China wants to do. Why are we throwing a wrench into our NATO allies, our relationship with our NATO allies, as opposed to trying to strengthen it?
I mean, a Stephen Miller world where strong powers just are able to invade weaker powers is a world in which weaker powers are going to want to get nuclear weapons or ally with China, or live in a world where Europe now thinks that because they have to be scared of the United States, maybe they should ally more strongly with China. It's not that, it's to say that we are sovereign in South America is just factually wrong. We are not sovereign in South America.
But Stephen Miller's describing a real world. He's describing a real...
No, he's not. He's describing...
Russia already invaded Ukraine.
Is it good or bad?
No, of course not. But that's the reality.
Basically
Wouldn't we rather live in that world where we are aware of the reality than pretend it doesn't exist?
Of course we're aware, but we say that invading Ukraine is bad, not good. That is why going into another country on our side is bad, not good. I mean, I don't understand the logic of saying they did a bad thing, so we do a bad thing. That makes zero sense.
You're talking about these scenarios as they're hypothetical. We did see,
and we've talked about ad nauseum,
a nuclear power, Russia, invading a sovereign country that's its...
I'm sorry,
make sure that the
maybe an answer is to defend Ukraine.
That we have,
it's
missile defenses in Greenland, that we have ship monitoring in Greenland. These are not happening right now. But this is quintessential Trump. Throw the idea out there that's the most aggressive, the most far-fetched, right? We're going to invade, and then come back to a negotiated point.
He threw this idea out there more than a year ago. What has he done pragmatically?
He actually threw this idea out in his first
and he named an
Let's not
emissary.
forget he was also going to take over the Panama Canal. Let's not forget that he was going to turn Gaza into some sort of sea town full of Trump towers. I mean, there's a lot of things that come out of his mouth. I'm not saying that you should not take
But that's a great
seriously.
example. He pushed the Chinese out of the Panama Canal. He said, we're going to invade the Panama Canal, right? That was the first point. And now the Chinese have less of a presence in the Panama Canal.
I don't know that the bluster is what's responsible
Isn't
for
that justifying exactly what he's doing right now? No. Okay. Well,
I guess it's weird to me to use Russia's invasion of Ukraine as a reason to actually justify military engagement with Greenland.
What's missing from Joe Borelli's framing is how much US power has historically depended on restraint and alliances, not just raw force. After World War II, the United States didn't become the dominant global power by grabbing territory. It became dominant by building institutions like NATO, the IMF, and security partnerships that made aggression costly and cooperation rewarding. That system is precisely why countries like Germany and Japan became allies instead of rivals. When you normalize the idea that strong countries can simply take what they want, you create incentives for weaker countries to seek nuclear weapons or align with authoritarian powers for protection. Political scientists have documented this pattern repeatedly, from North Korea to Iran. That's not theory, it's observable history. There's also a practical contradiction here. The US already has extensive military access around the world without owning land. We operate bases in Japan, South Korea, Germany, and Italy through agreements that actually strengthen alliances instead of poisoning them. Greenland is no different. Existing treaties already allow expanded radar systems, missile defense, and naval monitoring without threatening Danish sovereignty. Bluster may sound tough, but it often produces the opposite result. When leaders casually float invasions or takeovers, allies hedge their bets. European polling already shows declining trust in US leadership during periods of erratic foreign policy, and that opens space for China to present itself as the stable alternative, using Russia's invasion of Ukraine as justification for more territorial aggression completely flips the lesson. The takeaway from Ukraine isn't everyone should act like Russia. It's that invasions destabilize regions, unify adversaries, and drain national resources. Strength comes from credibility, not intimidation. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.